when you suffer through grief and when you grow up with a parent who, frankly, you need to take care of, and there's so much chaos, it like I was in survival mode for so long that it just took me a little bit longer to regulate and then get into my flow. I feel like I had to just take some time to heal.
Right.
And instead of actually doing that, I put my head down and did what I thought I was supposed to be doing. It just didn't work. And that's something that I always emphasize with my clients now is take your time, move through it, feel it, because regulating yourself out of survival mode is so important to get back in like an aligned and intentional state.
Welcome to Are We Happy Yet?
I'm Hannah Buzzo, licensed therapist.
I'm Jane Thatcher-Hahn, licensed clinical social worker. We're not just friends, we're therapists who have been working with our clients on improving their mental health and relationships for years. Coupled with our own life experiences, we found ourselves in a conundrum. As mental health becomes less stigmatized and conversations about healing, self-help, and personal growth have gone mainstream, why are more and more Americans reporting lower life satisfaction and increased mental health issues with each passing year?
The question kept nagging at us. Despite the growing openness around mental health, why are we seeing an increase in anxiety, depression, and isolation?
It's baffling, right? We're all diving into therapy, self-help, psychedelics, meditation, life hacks, you name it. But the sense of connection and well-being seems to be slipping away, no matter what we do.
So Jane and I got curious about the bigger picture, how creativity, politics, technology, work, spirituality, culture, and more impact our well-being. Our goal is to spark open, relatable conversations about these topics. Through unfiltered discussions, a few uncomfortable truths, we'll have lots of laughter and lightheartedness along the way. Join us each week as we dig deep into these questions, share insights, and try to understand what will truly, finally, make us happy.
Let's go.
This episode is sponsored by Luna Seeds, your tastiest hormone ally. Did you know our period is often referred to as our fifth vital sign? That means it's right up there with body temperature and pulse, and indicating our overall health. When our cycle is out of balance, we don't just get cramps. It can cause us to experience a slew of symptoms like poor sleep, breakouts, bloating, reduced cognitive function, mood swings, the list goes on.
Luna Seeds offers a natural solution to hormone imbalance with 2 delicious seasoning blends crafted to replenish critical micronutrients during each phase of your cycle. Just give your jar a shake and sprinkle a spoonful on anything savory for seed cycling made easy. Think topping your avocado toast, salads, soups, veggies. The possibilities are endless.
We really resonate with Luna Seeds' mission to empower women to take control of their hormonal health through a daily practice of mindful nutrition, especially in today's environment. Not only is Luna Seeds a great way to stay balanced, it also gives you an opportunity to be more in tune with your body, your moods, and your cycle. Food truly is medicine.
So if you're ready to upgrade your health with the power of seed cycling, head over to lunaseeds.com and use the code HAPPY10 for 10% off a Happy Hormones kit. That's HAPPY10 for 10% off both seasoning blends, valid through January 19th. Time to take control of your hormone health today.
Well, Jane, I'm super excited for today. You've brought on one of your amazing therapists on your team, Carly, and I'm super jazzed to talk to her. I met her at our podcast launch party a couple months ago, and she's so much fun. And I was like, this girl's got to come on because she's just fun and funny. And really has a lot to share around anxiety and OCD and culture and getting out in nature. And so I'm super excited that you brought Carly on today to chat with us about all those things.
Yeah. Welcome, Carly.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, we're so excited and lucky to have you. Carly, I don't know, a couple years ago came in and said, I'm looking for an internship. And I met her and was like, please come be a part of our team. And from her internship turned into a full-time therapist at Grit, and she does incredible work and is a great asset to our company and to her clients, and has a lot of really cool experiences. So thank you for being here. We're doing it virtually because your puppy Lemon needs a little bit of extra love and support right now, and so you're
just a little baby.
She's just a little baby. So you're puppy parenting right now. Just sounds like a good time. I am curious, Carly, if you will give us sort of the overview of who you are. You're a therapist, you're an adventurer, you are a small business owner, you've had several careers, you've just done a lot of really cool stuff. So wherever you want to start, jump in with kind of the overview of like who you are and how you got here.
Okay. So I'll sort of start at the beginning, and please pepper in questions or clarifications throughout. But
Okay.
I am originally from Hershey, Pennsylvania. I grew up there and then went to Penn State University, where I studied journalism. I originally wanted to be a sports journalist, and ended up sort of not liking, which is ironic, not liking being on camera. And so changed into like a print journalism major. So I've always loved to write, always loved to hear people's stories. From college, I moved to New York City, where I got a job at Saatchi & Saatchi, which is an advertising agency there. And I worked as an account executive for 2 years, and just sort of realized that the grind of New York City wasn't for me. Ended up like still kind of liking marketing and advertising, but wanted to make a big move. And I think like a lot of millennials or people feeling lost at that time, I ended up moving to Colorado in 2014.
It's such a thing. Why do we all do it?
We're all like, Colorado will solve it. There's mountains there. And so I moved here, where again I got another job in marketing, and enjoyed it, enjoyed the people, liked living in Denver, but still felt disconnected or misaligned from what I was actually meant to be doing. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I wasn't engaging in people's stories, which I really, really loved doing. And from there, had an opportunity to make a bit of a career change, moved into the like psychology, clinical counseling area from there, because I thought that, hey, maybe that is an opportunity to hear people's stories, but also help them. So instead of like being a journalist, it was, okay, let me listen, but also see if I can make a difference. I also moved that way because I had such a incredible experience in my own therapy journey, and thought that I could be helpful to others. So went back to grad school, while at the same time making a big move and becoming an adventure tourism guide. So throughout the summers, I would live over in Europe. I lived in Denmark and Sweden and Croatia, and would lead biking and hiking tours over there.
Wow.
I'm like sort of like collecting things as I walk through this story. But as I was doing that, I really saw this connection between nature and movement and travel and mental health. So it sort of like all fell together for me that, hey, this is like really something that I can utilize and put together as a skill set and take into a future career. And then to Jane's point, after grad school, or right at the very end, I was living up here in Summit County in the little town called Silverthorne outside of Breckenridge. And I found Grit Therapy, found Jane, and have been there for a little over 2 years now, in this career, and implementing nature and movement and a bit of, travel into my interventions with clients. So that's a very like high level experience. Where I've come from, and my journey. But yeah, Colorado for 10 years, this mountain town for nearly 3 now, have bought a house, have a partner, have a puppy, and really, really enjoying my life right now. I feel very lucky.
So because you're in the mountains in a little town with a puppy, like biking, I'm wondering like the Sex and the City, New York City marketing girly thing was not the vibe.
Yeah, it wasn't the vibe. And like
Okay.
we can get very much into this, but my mother was CMO of Hershey Entertainment and Resorts. She's an incredible businesswoman, like just a boss. Climbed the career ladder, worked for Hershey Entertainment and Resorts for 35 years, ended up chief marketing officer. And so I
Wow.
think in my 18-year-old brain, I was like, I have to be like my mom.
Yeah.
She's really empowered and really cool and has created this life for herself and for me, frankly. And so I did what I thought I was supposed to do, which was move to New York, get a cool ad agency job. And I just I felt like my soul was being sucked out of me in that grind and hustle there in New York.
What was it like for you if you had this like goal and programming of like, I've got to be like mom, right? Like, this is what we do. What was it like for you when you started to realize, oh shit, like this isn't what I like?
Okay, it was a long journey.
Yeah.
I will say the other half of me, right? My father was a very empathetic, sensitive man who was a journalist and a writer. And he really raised me. My mom worked a lot and was very successful. And so my dad was a stay-at-home dad. Looking back, I can see that I got a lot of my qualities from him. But the caveat is he was an alcoholic. And so I was on this sort of up and down journey and roller coaster with him for so long. He passed away when I was 18, so in 2009. And I'm not lying when I tell you I buried everything. Did not grieve, did not face it. I was a freshman in college, so I very much was like, hey, this is just going to go away. I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to party, and then I'm going to move to New York and do everything that I think I'm supposed to do. And it just bubbled over for years and years. It started when I was about 22. I would get panic attacks in New York City. And so I didn't really know how to process that. Started seeing a therapist, which was helpful to kind of understand what panic attacks were. But then my solution was, oh, I'm going to move to Colorado. I'm going to get out of here. And that didn't really work until I was about 25, 26 and got to a point where I was diagnosed with OCD. And once I found that diagnosis, I started to utilize the right tools, both in therapy and through medication, to change my course. But it took a really long time. And I think that people underestimate the consequences and the impact of burying grief for so long. Grief and trauma, frankly.
Yeah. I want to dive in with that, but I also just want to point out for those of you who think Colorado is going to fix your problems, it won't. As therapists who work with people in the mountains, we promise you that your problems will be the same in paradise as they will everywhere else, right?
That's what they say.
You don't believe that. Yeah. It's pretty interesting.
It did for like a year, and then they those panic attacks and those intrusive thoughts came roaring.
Yeah, when you're like skiing and going to all the breweries and the shows, it's like a vibe. And then when you tear your ACL and like have paralyzing anxiety, you're like, oh shit! Like,
I remember that phase for you.
Yes.
Carly, thank you for just opening up about your own experience with anxiety and OCD. I know you're helping a lot of your own clients with that. So it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was after your father passed that any of those things started showing up, or were they around before that?
Not so much. I think I was just compartmentalizing as a teenager. And I think back on my high school experience, and a lot of it I don't remember, which is just, upon reflection, a total coping mechanism and a way to keep myself safe. My anxiety didn't really hit until I was around 22, which was 4 years after my father passed. And it was manifesting itself as health related anxiety. So I was just a big hypochondriac. And I would read a lot about it. and I had been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, which I appreciated, but it didn't feel like it fit, because my thoughts were so strong, and because the rumination and the obsessions that I had felt so scary. I lived with that diagnosis for about 4 years and tried to manage it, like I said, by moving to Colorado and by going to breweries and by dating and trying to form a community out here. But just nothing really worked until I got my OCD diagnosis.
And what was that like? Like, what did that shift for you?
Oh my God. If I could tell you like how different my life is. And that's, I'm such an advocate for people understanding their anxiety more, because it could be OCD. And this is like very vulnerable, but my thoughts and the things that I was anxious about were so outlandish and did not make any sense. One of my biggest intrusive thoughts was that somebody was going to poison me, or make me sick in some way. I was so fearful of getting sick. Like I would have to hide my water bottles. I couldn't like leave anything unattended because I thought that someone was going to come in and do something really scary or mean. Again, upon reflection, I really connected that to the fact that my father, frankly, poisoned himself to death. So it's like very much connected in my brain that's why I was a bit of a hypochondriac and had these health related thoughts. But getting the OCD diagnosis made me feel like I wasn't losing my mind, because there was a point there when I was like 26, 27, where I thought that I wasn't going to be okay. I went to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore and got like a full diagnostic evaluation. And I remember the doctor coming in and just being like, girl, you have OCD. Like you have OCD to a T. You check every single box. The intrusive thoughts, the rumination, the constant worry, the checking. It had just been like, I was so misunderstood for so long. And then to identify with that, it gave me hope that I could change my life. And I really have. Like my life is so different since that happened. What now, like 8 years ago? I'm a totally different person living a totally different life.
Wow.
So what, like, I guess my question is like in that moment, right? Like, so, your dad dies. Of course you do what we do as 18-year-olds, which is like, I'm moving on. I'm doing my thing.
I'm fine.
I'm fine. And then, you move to Colorado. It sounds like you're like trying to live this normal life, but there's this feeling inside of you that's like, something's not quite right. I mean, is that accurate? Like what was that experience for you?
It's so accurate. I look back on it like it was a misalignment. I was doing everything that I thought would make me happy and make me live a fulfilled life, and none of it was working. None of my values, none of the things that I cared about, none of my strengths were being utilized in any part of my life, in my job, in my relationships, in my home. It like there was just nothing that was on the same path.
And so, just something we talk about a lot on the podcast is, where do we develop the story of like, these are all the things I need to be, or these are the things that will make me happy. So it sounds like for you, you've got like boss bitch mom, which is awesome. Hey, Carly's mom. She is awesome. And that can be a little bit confusing. Like, an empowered woman is XYZ, right? An empowered woman is making lots of money, or an empowered woman is really far in her career, or she's in a man's, quote unquote man's world, or, that can get confusing, I think, for women, for everybody. So it sounds like you've got like the family story, the cultural story. Where else do you think you sort of learn like, oh, these are the things I should be, or these are the things that will make me happy?
I think just watching my friends do what, they knew what worked for them, and like didn't move across the country, just would either like stay home or stay close, or to like a city near Pennsylvania on the East Coast. It just didn't seem as hard for them
Yeah.
to find their thing.
Yeah.
And it's just like when you suffer through grief and when you grow up with a parent who, frankly, you need to take care of, and there's so much chaos, it like, I was in survival mode for so long that it just took me a little bit longer to regulate and then
Yeah.
get into my flow. I feel like I had to just take some time to heal.
Right.
And instead of actually doing that, I put my head down and did what I thought I was supposed to be doing. It just didn't work. And that's something that I always emphasize with my clients now is take your time, move through it, feel it, because regulating yourself out of survival mode is so important to get back in like an aligned and intentional state.
And there's something too, and I'd be curious your thoughts that I'm seeing like through these conversations on the podcast, through my work, just existing on the planet, that like two things. One, in which everyone appears to be doing well, right? Like on social media, in their life, like everyone's life looks and appears like they're doing well. And also, because we're told, get the career, do the therapy, go to Pilates, whatever the thing is, take the multivitamin, join the book club, read this book. And there's still that deep feeling of something's not quite right, that folks feel shame about that. And they feel like something's wrong with them. And it's can be, I think, a huge blocker in the sense of, why does everyone else seem to be managing life in a easier way? And I'm doing all these things. Why am I not feeling better? That I think gets people to feel really stuck and sad and ashamed and broken. I mean, I'm curious what your experience was with that.
Oh my God. I felt like I remember having these moments of, this can't be life. Like I was not born to pay taxes and lose weight. And that's something I still struggle with now. Of like, why are we all here? What are we all doing? But I just knew in my core that something had to change. And I remember reading something about this health related anxiety and fear of death that really resonated for me, which was, if you're really fearful of death, or if your anxiety is at an all-time high thinking about life ending, there could potentially be a misalignment. Like you're not on the path that feels most authentic to who you are, because you're afraid that life's going to end and you didn't get to fulfill any of that potential. And I think since the switch, since the OCD diagnosis, since I started to kind of move intentionally into who I am, my fear of death has completely disappeared, or at least come to like a normal and regulated fear, rather than how heightened I was, and in just like a constant state of arousal and survival mode.
I think that's really helpful because, when my clients come to me, when I personally am like, fear of death, what does it all mean? Am I a speck? Blink of an eye and I'm gone, those kinds of thoughts, right? There are times in your life when it's easier to manage that like normal existential human experience or human angst. And what I'm hearing is like, when you're sort of more aligned with your strengths, your values, the thing like your hidden deep dreams, right? Like the things that you really want to be, the things you were really yearning for. When you're more aligned with that, it's easier to deal with that sort of existential anxiety.
Exactly.
And also when you're a little,
and you just feel more empowered to take it all on and like feel it rather than fear it or push it away. So it was like my late 20s were a big transformation for me, and I'm like forever grateful for really exploring my mental health, and then that led me into the career that I am in now. And I think that's like been so helpful with clients too, and I'm sure you two can speak to this, but like to have experienced the depths of anxiety and intrusive thoughts and rumination. It's just really helpful in my work now because I can empathize.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think too, I mean, I truly believe this. Like, I don't think we have to go through clients' like exact struggles, but I do think we can only take clients as far as we've gotten, right? Like, if I just think like us doing our own work is necessary. Like, you have to be on a constant journey of self discovery and growth and healing, I think, to be a good therapist.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's so funny to see how, like, now that you name the grief or name some of the anxiety, just watching it transform throughout your life. Like, it'll pop up at random times, especially like for me in big events, and I'll feel really anxious or really scared. And it's just, oh, that's grief. Naming it instead of burying it like I did for so long.
Okay, so what I just heard you say was brilliant. That like even though you've done all this work and got this diagnosis and meds and therapy, like you still feel anxiety.
Oh my God. Of course. Yes.
We were both going to jump on the same thing.
We were?
Yeah, we were going to be like, great, Carly, walked right into it.
Well, I think that's like I mean, tell us your experience, Carly, like living this with lived experience and also working in this. Like, is it a fair expectation that we'll never be anxious?
No, anxiety is an emotion like joy and sadness and anger and excitement. We have anxiety because it's ingrained into our DNA. It can be helpful, and that's how I'm just always trying to visualize it now. And I've like written about this in some blog posts, but if you view emotions like waves, they just wash over you and then they retract. And another one comes and another retracts. And instead of trying to like run from the good ones, or I'm sorry, run from the bad ones and hold on to the good ones, it's just about like embracing all of them. Because if you're trying to run from all the bad ones, how exhausting is life, right? It's like life is too magical to be constantly trying to avoid the scary and the bad emotions. And so, let me normalize anxiety for everybody because I still very much get it.
Yeah, that's so important. I think one of the things we've been talking a lot about is that the avoidance of your anxiety, pain, suffering, grief, fear often leads to all this additional suffering, you know? So if you're using sex, drugs, alcohol, your phone, your numbing, whatever you're doing, there's a lot of ways to avoid like the initial anxiety or pain or frustration or fear. And a lot of times working with clients, and I think we've all seen this, we're treating sort of the original emotion, and then we're treating a lot of behaviors, a lot of attempts to avoid that and push that down, as you were mentioning in your early 20s.
Absolutely. And mine was very physical, right? Mine was manifesting itself as panic attacks and rumination and like sickness. I have an autoimmune disease now, like from all of that. So it was just like I really worked my system up so much, and that mind body connection I think is so powerful too in healing, because sometimes physical regulation comes before emotional regulation.
Can we do a little clarification of the words we're throwing around, like panic attack, anxiety, OCD? Carly, I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about and living through the experience of what's anxiety versus what's OCD. And some people I think are even a little unclear about what a panic attack is, and feel free anybody to jump in on this, but like how would you define a panic attack?
Yeah, I would be curious about both of your thoughts on this as well, or if you've ever had them. My panic attacks are very physical. So racing heart, feeling like I'm going to have a heart attack or die. My palms are sweaty. Just total inability to focus on anything else. And they come, or I should say they would come from me out of nowhere. Just would feel very disorienting. They would have been at work. I'd have to go to the bathroom and take deep breaths. They would happen in the middle of the night. I'd wake up kind of gasping for air. And I never really could identify when they were happening. So that's why they felt really scary to me. But I don't know. Have you guys had them before?
I have not had a panic attack before. I more just have like a generalized anxiety going on, but everything that you describe is how I understand it, particularly coming out of nowhere, not being able to control it, feeling like you're going to die. Very physical experience. I mean, I have clients who've been like going to the doctor for years and suddenly they're just like, well, I guess I'm actually just having panic attacks, you know? So that's kind of been my experience.
Yeah, I've had experience with panic, and it is like, for me, in my experience, like fully like blinders go on, like death is happening. Like, I mean, like panic is like really the only word to describe it is like my heart is beating, my vision is like darkening, like this is it. Like what, you know?
Yeah. And that's so funny you said that. My first panic attack ever, I was living in New York City. I was 22 and I called 911.
Yeah.
Because I thought that I thought death was knocking on my doorstep. It was really, really scary.
Yeah.
And I think that too, like that becomes an experience that's very like fear inducing in itself. So when I would start to have the racing heart and like feel a panic attack coming on, I would get to the point of like shame because I remembered calling 911, and it gets into this like very cyclical experience. Totally. I do move through panic attacks every now and then now too. But I welcome it, and I know that I know what's going on, and I know that my life might feel overwhelming at times. And so I'm much more nurturing with panic attacks than I was back then when it was fueled by shame and guilt.
Yeah. Well, and like unknown, right? And like fear,
Totally.
like what is happening here?
Yeah. And then to your question, Jane, anxiety to me and, you know, my education experience has always been rooted in like real life things. So last week was really intense and filled with anxiety for a lot of my clients with the time change and the election. They're more like based in a reality, whereas OCD is associated with something called intrusive thoughts, whether that be mine, which were related to somebody poisoning me. I've had clients who are very afraid that they're going to like drop a baby or stab their friend when they're holding a knife, or that they've run over somebody with their car. Just these like thoughts that aren't necessarily based in any sort of reality, but their brains really stick to it happening. It's a chemical imbalance where those intrusive thoughts, which we all have, feel way more intense for people with the OCD diagnosis versus people who don't, or who just experience regular anxiety. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And I guess if I were to define intrusive thoughts, I would say that they're like, they also feel like they come out of nowhere. They're often disturbing, or they're like keep coming back over and over and over, and you don't feel like you can like manage them or do anything about them. Like they might have some emotion attached to them. Anything y'all want to add to that in terms of what an intrusive thought is, just to clarify?
I think intrusive thoughts are normal, right? Like I think the way that our brains are set up to scan for threats, like intrusive thoughts are normal. I think what makes them challenging is when they turn into anxious loops and like fear, right? Like when we start to avoid or start to get fearful or start to loop and ruminate. And then specifically with OCD, you know, they're ego dystonic. So meaning like the intrusive thought comes in and it's completely against your values, your worldview, right? It's like, I want to fuck a dog. It's, and that is like a really disturbing thought. And then it's like this attachment to, oh my God, why did I have this thought? What does that mean about me? It gets really scary.
Yes. And that's where when mine would come in, I thought I was losing my mind, which felt very scary to me.
Yeah.
And I think about it exactly like everybody has intrusive thoughts, whether it be, what if I'm holding this baby and I just drop it? Or what if I just stab my friend? Those are very like normal human thoughts that come through. And most people, or I shouldn't say most, people without OCD can just kind of let those thoughts float by.
Yeah.
Whereas people with the OCD diagnosis, they hold on to them. They get sticky and then they turn into really scary emotions that can feel out of control.
And going through that whole, like, for OCD, you've got to have the obsession, the compulsive behavior as well, right? So it's obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yes.
So talk us through, like, you have the intrusive thoughts, and then what is this whole compulsive piece that
so the
qualifies it?
compulsions, the compulsions are acts that you do in order to soothe the intrusive thoughts. There's a little bit of a misunderstanding on what that means. And I think that's why my diagnosis was hard to find, because I didn't have any outward compulsions, at least not as an adult. I think as a kid, I would have to hit a light a certain amount of times in order to feel better. I would have to check that the stove was turned off or that the door was locked a certain way. Those are kind of like the outward compulsions. The thing about OCD is compulsions can also be internal. And that was what I was experiencing in my late 20s. My compulsions were playing worst case scenarios in my head like a movie reel. They would loop and they would loop. And in my mind, or in my OCD mind, I thought that that was going to protect me when the worst case scenario would happen. So that would make me feel better in the moment. But it was just this repetitive process that happened over and over again. And that movie reel became so exhausting. My nervous system was shot. So I think that's what people don't understand. That movie reel is actually a compulsion as well, even though it's just in your mind.
Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions. And I think I shared this with you, Carly, when I met you, but I'm 31. I've been in therapy since I was 12. And I've, gone through, like, I've gotten a generalized anxiety disorder, a PTSD diagnosis. It wasn't until this year when I got a new therapist and was talking to her about some of these anxious thoughts and the ways in which I was dealing with them, right? Like, it's interesting too that you're talking about that yours was really around health after the death of your dad. Mine is really around like rejection and acceptance and love, which I think directly correlates to my childhood. But anywho, in a group, and this feels vulnerable, but in a group setting, like I would count and see, is this person talking to more people than I am? Did this person come talk to me? Mental compulsions. I would replay everything I said that day to kind of find perfectly, does this person like me or not? Right. And so I think that's why I went so many years without a diagnosis. Is there's so much misconception around what OCD is. You have to check doorknobs, you have to check the stove. And there's some of that for me, but a lot of it was mental checking, right? And I think that's something as therapists and most traditional graduate programs, we're not trained in that. I think there's a big misconception around OCD. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people's diagnosis is misdiagnosed as anxiety or not even recognized when that mental compulsion piece feels like a prison of your own mind. Like that is the piece that you're saying. It's like, I feel like I'm going crazy. That's the hardest piece. And I think there's not a lot of understanding about it. And there's a lot of shame about it, right?
There's so much shame. Exactly. And I think to your point, like those thoughts bring upon anxiety.
Right.
So it's a quick diagnosis to just jump right to it's generalized anxiety, when in reality it's rooted in something very different.
Yeah. And I think too, I'd be curious about your experience. I'm newer to this journey than you are. Like, I resisted getting on medications for so long. I was like, I just need to meditate and do this retreat and maybe this psychedelic and da 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 da. But at the end of the day, like, maybe 8 months ago, I got on medications, and my anxiety is still very high, but what's different is the checking. Like the checking does not feel as big. And that's the piece that like was killing me, right? Like you said, it's exhausting. Like that checking piece, not having to deal with that as much is like such a game changer, and like allows me to actually deal with the anxiety, allows me to actually deal with my trauma, because I'm not doing this behavior of like avoiding and relieving. Like I'm at the root of it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I felt the same way. It was like my intrusive thoughts and subsequent compulsions went into another room
Yeah.
so that I could finally deal with the root of it. And that's part of the OCD journey as well, which I think you're naming. I found that the health related anxiety was tied to my dad's health and death, especially the poison part. And so that was like so helpful for me to uncover and then start to heal and grieve almost 10 years later. The other thing that I'll say about medication is when you're a hypochondriac or when you have that health related anxiety, it's really hard to take a pill. I was very against it. I was very scared. My doctor at the time gave me the option to take a blood test, which would then select the best SSRI for me and would have the least amount of side effects. That was the only way that my OCD mind would let me take it. Because I was just so afraid that I was going to have an adverse reaction or that it wasn't going to work or I was going to get worse. And she said, no, like we'll make sure that it's a good one for you. And so I highly recommend that option to anybody who's feeling a little fearful about taking medication or worried about side effects, because it truly, like, it changed my life within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you're talking about, I want to make a plug for this, Carly. You're talking about a genetic test.
Okay. Yes.
Right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Like match your DNA to it.
Yes. So I just want to make a big plug for that because a lot of medications out there will not work great with your body. And we actually literally have the technology for you to come in and say, here's my blood. And then your nurse practitioner or your psychiatrist or your doctor can say, cool, here's the drug that's going to be best for you, where you're going to have the least. Because, I think people have lots of reservations about these drugs that we can talk about, but weight gain or issues with your sex drive or sexual performance or feeling numb or like there's a lot of things people are afraid of. And I have had clients who are like, I've tried every drug on the market, and until I did like the genetic test, that was the moment when it like really helped me. So I'm just making a side note plug for that's worth the money and worth the time, and not everybody offers it.
I always just really felt that life is too short to like white knuckle through it all, right?
Totally.
Like I was suffering so much and I was so anxious all the time, and it transformed everything for me. I used to not be able to go far from hospitals because I needed to know that I was close to a place that could take care of me if I were to get sick. And now I think about over the past 8 years, like all the places that I've traveled and how free I feel of that fear.
Middle of nowhere, Croatia on a bike,
Exactly.
guiding a bunch of people.
Think about it. yeah. Like, whatever.
Amazing.
I know, it's so nice.
Well, and I think it's good to just normalize. I'm also on an anxiety medication that I went on when COVID first hit. And I had been on and off some meds in my 20s as well. And huge game changer for me. Finding the right dose was always part of it, but also like huge game changer with sleep and managing anxiety. And I don't know, to me, it seems like the biggest resistance to medication right now is sort of, I think exactly what you named, Carly, is that like white knuckling it. Like I should be able to figure this out. I hear most of my clients say this is what they say. It's fine for other people to be on medication. I'm not against medication, but it's not fine for me, which is one of the things we do as humans. We love to make different rules for ourselves than we have for the entire rest of the billions of people on the planet. But I mean, is that the biggest thing? What else do you guys seeing in your practice? Like, what's the resistance to medication?
I think it's the same that there was with therapy until very recently, right? Like before COVID, the conversation around therapy was like, you've got a mental illness if you go to therapy, right? Like that's and then I think COVID illuminated there's so much more to mental health than just diagnosis and an illness. And I think unfortunately, the medical model hasn't caught up to that. And I think there's a lot of stigma around mental health medications, just like there was with therapy. And I think there still kind of is with therapy, but I think that's a big piece of it. And I mean, for me, part of my decision making was like, if I got cancer, I would do the chemo. If I got diabetes, I would take the medication. So why the hell am I white knuckling this, right? And so I think the stigma and who it's for and what it does is a big piece of it.
100%. I think too, and this is something that we can potentially dive into. Well, okay, I will say one thing. I don't know if I can say this on a podcast. My OBGYN said that SSRIs and Valtrex should just be in the water for like all Americans. Valtrex is like the herpes medication. So it's just like we live in a time where our brains aren't caught up to the experiences around us. And it's just like an evolutionary thing that we're experiencing. And I, as somebody who really values the role of nature and healing, I think about the collective trauma that our species has experienced over the past like 500 years or so, being ripped from nature. And now we've got all this technology. And it's just like, from an evolutionary standpoint, our brains might not be quite ready for where we are. And if you need medication to help you with that chemical imbalance or with the disconnect, like I think that is very okay. And it's scary, but it can be really, really helpful for people to be present and to like enjoy their life.
Yeah.
And I think that whole piece of it allows you to deal with the root, I think is really important because a lot of people are you were mentioning, Carly, like being in that really dysregulated, like survival mode. And I'm telling you, like, you don't process your trauma when you're in survival mode. That's not how our systems work. You don't go through the EMDR or ecotherapy or all of these types of therapies your therapist is going to throw at you if you are barely surviving and you're feeling totally dysregulated. So sometimes that piece can really give you access to the actual deeper work that you need to do.
And I'm of the mind. Oh, go ahead, Carly.
I was going to say, it doesn't have to be forever. I remember when I was on it, my doctor was like, hey, it could be a year, 2 years. And then that's that. So it's truly like a very personal experience for so many, but I totally agree. And that it helped me get myself out of survival mode. Finally.
Yeah. And I'm of the mind that like our brains and bodies aren't stupid, right? They do what they need to do to protect us. I'm of the mind that my OCD like helped me survive to a certain point, right? Like I had to check and like obsess about people loving me or being abandoned or belonging, and now I have the resourcing and the scaffolding to be able to go into it more. Like it's all for survival, right? And so instead of focusing on the mental compulsion, like I'm stable enough to do the deeper work. Like I think we do develop different symptoms and ways of being that like help us survive to a certain point.
100%.
And I love what you said because I think I'm such a believer in that, like things happen for a reason and we've moved through those times to have tools to help us move through future times. So I resonate with that as well. Like, hey, we had to go through that and collect all that data in order to be where we are now.
And the language I use with my clients and myself is that's the best adaptation you could have developed in the moment, right? Like we're children, we're teenagers, we're young adults. Like that is the very best we could do. And we're just adapting in the ways that our system, to your point, our intelligence systems are just trying to adapt us to the situation for like our highest safety and our highest connection, you know, because that means survival. And so a lot of times as an adult, I'll just say to people like, that adaptation was great. Like, was it healthy? What, like, we're not even going to put healthy or not healthy or good or bad. We're just going to say like, that was the adaptation you needed then. And now you're an adult and you're out of your family of origin and you're in new relationships and you're in new situations. So now we just want to like be in 2024. We want to be in this moment and say like, all right, that adaptation where I like scream and yell and crawl up in like to a fetal position every time my husband says this one thing is like not helping me anymore. Like I don't have to do that because it's not the same and I'm not a child. So I think it's all about like pulling yourself forward, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Did the best you could with the information you had at the time. I love that.
That's right.
Can we pivot a little bit to like the nature movement travel piece that you were talking about?
Yes, I would love that. So after maybe a lot of people have this experience in their late 20s. I sort of like see it a lot in my clients, but
Saturn return.
What?
Do you know about the Saturn return? What is it, 28 years old or something? Saturn's back where you
like 28 to 30
were born. Yeah. Clearly I don't know the details, but
I don't know. I like blew it all up because I like awoke and was like, this isn't working for me anymore. I'm not happy. So I left my job in marketing. I ended a relationship and I applied to become an active travel leader. My mom had gone on like a bunch of trips and she was like, why don't you just test it out? And it was this like really intense 6-month-long hiring process.
Oh, wow.
It culminated in like a day-long hiring event in San Francisco. And I ended up getting the job. I was like blown away, shocked. And from there, started to lead hiking and biking trips internationally. So like I said earlier, I lived in Scandinavia and Croatia, and my world just got so much wider and my perspective changed, and I got to experience different cultures and meet all sorts of people from many walks of life. And it was truly like one of the most enriching experiences, and I'm forever grateful for that job. That was in 2018 and 2019. And then here comes COVID. So again, had to like pivot a little bit because the travel industry sunk. And I went back to grad school. And that's when I decided to become a counselor. Did that for like the 2 years of COVID, everything shutting down. Was very like an online master's program experience, and would pepper in over the summers the adventure travel. And it all made sense in my brain. The trips were typically 7 days long, and I would see how my guests would transform from day 1 to day 7. Wow. And their perspective, and when they moved, and when they connected, and when they were outside in a different space, they were more open and happier and more fulfilled. So I've always thought this like perfect recipe for like enrichment and potential like change is that adventure piece, right? Getting out of your comfort zone, the connection piece, because healing truly does form in relationships, and then the like nature travel piece, being outside and embracing what that has to offer, rather than being just stuck inside. So there's so many studies that support how powerful nature is on our brains, and I'm like such an advocate for that because I've seen it firsthand.
I almost feel like there's a few things in therapy when I'm supporting people where I'm like, here's something that if you had more of, you probably wouldn't even need to come here, which is like connection, right?
Yes.
Connection. And I think nature is one of those things. And I think creativity is one of those things. And certainly, like, you can have all of those things and still go to therapy. And I engage with all those things and still love to go to therapy. But anything else you'd add to that list? Like connection, nature, creativity,
Adventure.
bless you,
Did we say adventure? Travel.
Yeah.
travel, adventure, awe.
I know.
Wonder.
Whenever I like go somewhere, even if it's like literally Fort Collins, an hour away, I'm like, it just gets you out of your blinders and like into like, oh, there's a whole nother world out here, you know?
I know. And you know, like, let's talk about what nature does to our brain, right? It like lowers blood pressure, it increases our immune system, it activates that default network, which, to your point, Jane, is creativity, is perspective shift, is connection. So with my clients, like, I'm always checking in on not only mind, body, spirit connection, but also the nature piece. Like, great. Are you connected to yourself? Wonderful. Are you connecting to others? Amazing. Are you connecting to a higher power, if that's what you believe? Awesome.
Yeah.
But are you like grounding in nature? That's like, that's the fourth part for me, because it's so important for our mental and physical health. So always get outside, be in nature.
It's funny because you're talking about things that I feel like we're like seeking after. Like, I'm trying to lower my blood pressure and I'm trying to feel more calm and I'm trying to like blah, 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 you know, and you're like, just go be out in nature.
Well, and something I say too to my clients, so often we pass through it, right? Like, we'll drive through nature, we bike through nature, we hike, we run, like, we're kind of just like wandering through it, but so rarely are we in it and sitting with it and connecting with it. And that's the practice, and I think that's what some people miss. Just the idea of being in it can feel uncomfortable or potentially boring because of how active and how stimulated we need to be at all times. But just being in nature is really healing and powerful.
There's something interesting that happens in Colorado and mountain places, mountain towns at large, I think, where there's sort of a conquering thing. I know, Carly, you've seen that in the community that you're in, but they're sort of like, I'm going to conquer nature. I use nature to like boost an ego or do this or do, you know, and that's not what you're talking about. Doesn't sound like. And I'm curious, for people who are just listening in, if they just want to be more connected to nature and get all of those benefits, are there specific things they can do? I mean, is it like, are you literally just asking them to like slow down, sit down and take a breath? Is that kind of what you're getting at here?
I mean, essentially, like, I know that sounds very like cliche therapy speak, but it does help. It activates these different parts of our brain. It slows everything down. It softens. There's there's plenty to do. I love to like create an intention if I go for a hike. There's you can look for certain colors on a hike, and so that makes you sort of be mindful for looking around and being present with nature. Just like expressing gratitude as you walk. I'm trying to think of other things that I really like to do. With that intention piece, if it's something like, I don't know, letting something go or resiliency or trust, I think it can be a cool practice to go for a walk or sit in nature and look for ways that intention shows up. So, letting things go with the fall leaves, or resiliency in the way that the light comes through a tree canopy. Like, I think there are so many lessons that we can learn from the natural world. We're natural creatures, and we forget that sometimes. So just embracing all of that.
Yeah, I love that.
The other thing that I'll say about techniques for nature is just moving. being out there, because when we move in nature, it's usually bilaterally, whether that be biking or skiing, walking, running, kind of that like 1-2, 1-2. What that bilateral movement does is opens up the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the nervous system that clicks on after fight or flight. So it's really soothing in general to just be moving bilaterally outdoors. You're opening up like a ton of mental health benefits already. So I say 120 minutes a week. That's like a prescription from a ecotherapist. Get outside and do anything you can to like take it all in.
Carly, how hard do I have to work out to get the benefits?
Work out?
Yeah, how hard do I have to move? Because you're saying
you don't have to move. No, you don't have to work out. You don't even have to think about it as a workout. You can think of it as a nature workout and move very slowly. Don't even like get your heart rate up if you don't want to. Just be outside.
Love it.
I love that too. Just clarifying for us, those of us who are not as excited about exercise.
I know.
As others.
Yeah, I like move back and forth on my excitement over exercise.
Yeah.
But even if you're not excited about exercise, just getting outside in nature.
Like, get a beer and sit outside, right? That counts.
Yeah, drinking outside counts, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
As long as you're like looking at a mountain or something.
Yeah.
Exactly.
One thing, Carly, you mentioned that I just kind of want to return to is you talked a lot about travel and what that does for you, how you feel when you travel. Can you just jump back in on that and share some thoughts?
Yes, I love to travel. My goal was to get to 30 countries before I turned 30. And I had gotten to like 28 and then COVID hit. And then I didn't get to 30 before 30. So I know. But so now it's like, all right, I'm 34. So the goal is like 34 before 34, 35 before 35. I just like feel so connected to travel. I think that's when you can really learn a lot about yourself. I talk a lot with my clients about comfort zone versus growth zone, and they can't like really overlap. And when we travel, we are taking ourselves right out of the comfort zone and into the growth zone. It sounds like silly, but I think that everybody in their life should be in a country where nobody speaks your language and you have to get from like point A to point B because it's so scary. But it's also like we're all human, we're all connected. And my experience has always been that people want to help each other, and just being in that kindness and immersing yourself in another culture, I think has really like expanded my perspective, and recommend it to, you know, anyone who's sort of ready to move into the growth zone for a little bit. That would not have been possible without me like blowing up my life and getting my OCD diagnosis. So again, like it just comes back to that, like Hannah said, like the meaning making of it all. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have gone to all those places if I didn't kind of like look my fear in the face and move forward with it. So yeah, my I guess my like final thoughts on that are always like, get out of your comfort zone, go somewhere new, be in nature, and try to connect with somebody different than you.
What have you learned about culture and mental health and contentment and happiness and well-being?
You know, what's interesting is you say that. I spent a lot of time in Croatia. That's kind of like my place. I want to buy a property there one day. And they don't have mental health therapists.
They don't?
It's like not really a thing. No. It's like, I think it will come, but they're not quite there yet. One, because they're really like a present culture that those people have been at war for generations and generations, and just finally feeling into peace. And that's what makes them happy. that their children are safe and that their parents are safe, and that brings
Mhm.
them contentment and joy. So it's like it's been an interesting experience for me to experience what happiness feels like in different parts of the world.
Hmm.
And I don't know what that means about the US. I think that we're like certainly more open to talking about our feelings and
Yeah.
being vulnerable with each other. But it's also like, ooh, we've got a grind culture here, and we've got
Mhm.
things that we think should make us happy and don't. So
Yeah.
there's a disconnect at times here that don't necessarily exist in other cultures.
Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful. And I mean, I think if you're on sort of a journey around meaning making or even contentment, I mean, I think travel really helps you like really pull back the template and the lens that your culture has put upon you, right? Sometimes it's hard to do that, like when you're surrounded by a bunch of people who are also in a hustle culture, in
Totally.
individualism, in sort of like this capitalistic sort of grind. And
Yeah.
I've heard that feedback a lot from people, every time I come back from Mexico, I'm like, what is going on? Like, why are they're like so much happier than we are? And the statistics back that up,
Yeah.
and obviously not everybody in Mexico and not every place and not every situation, but there is an overall like general mental health there is better. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And that's been my experience traveling through some of those European countries.
Hmm.
Just it seems like the simpler the
Yeah.
better. And that's always something that is a takeaway for me. But I have to be reminded of it that, oh, actually I don't need that much to be happy.
Yeah.
And you can get like a little oversaturated here.
Totally.
But I think travel is a good reminder of that.
Yeah. One thing we haven't gone over, and I want to really pick your brain about, is you have a small, women-owned, led-run business that's actually got an amazing product for women. Will you talk a little bit about it? I know that's been like a very exciting venture for you.
Yes, it's so exciting, and we actually sell them
Yeah.
at the grit therapy offices, which is so
Yeah,
nice.
we sure do.
That's
Luna Seeds.
amazing.
Yeah, come
See
on
them
by.
every day. It is a company called Luna Seeds, Loona, and I bought the business with two of my close friends who I worked in this travel company with, and it is essentially like our mission is to support women in understanding their health. We have two. I'm gonna like botch this, and my business partners are gonna be mad at me. Okay, we have two
We can
seasoning
change anything.
blends. It's a food. It's a food. So we have two seasoning blends. One is for your follicular phase, which is the first 2 weeks of your menstrual cycle, and then the other is for your luteal phase, which is the back half of your menstrual cycle.
Carly,
This is
I'm 41 or 42, it's hard to say, and I've never heard those words in my life.
You haven't?
right.
No. I'm happy to be hearing them. I'm happy that you're educating me about them.
Jane, it's so crazy. And I think it's something that I feel so passionately about because I didn't learn this. Like, I didn't know that I had a follicular and a luteal phase. That was not part of my health curriculum growing up.
Yeah.
And there is so, like, women, our cycles are so sacred because we show up differently during each phase. Like in the follicular, we're kind of like, bada bada bing, let's go, let's produce, like let's do heavy workouts, let's eat a lot, and let's have sex. Like we love our follicular, and our luteal is more like our winter phase of like let's rest and let's stretch, and I don't feel like having sex, and I'm about to get my period and I'm mad at you. So like there are reasons that we're showing up in different ways during different phases of our cycle. What our product does is helps to supplement some of the micronutrients that we're missing during each. So the follicular is pumpkin seed and flax. And what that helps do is like regulate estrogen levels and reduce inflammation during those first 14 days, where the luteal helps sort of prepare you for menstruation and replace some like key, I don't even know what they're called, key micronutrients things when you are about to get your period. And, you know, like I didn't know that when I was growing up, that each phase was different and that we were missing certain micronutrients during each of the phases. And they're both really tasty. So like I said, follicular is pumpkin seed and flax, and then luteal is sesame and sunflower. You can sprinkle it on soups, on avocado toast, on salads.
Yeah.
We're in the process of potentially developing different products like a sweet blend or some like travel packs. But yeah, it's like a good practice, not only because it's good for you, right? Like food is medicine, but it's also helpful to know when you're in your follicular and when you're in your luteal, because it just helps you be more attuned to your body.
Love
And
that.
I feel like very passionate, very lucky to be involved and kind of excited for what the future of Luna Seeds is.
And if you're like Jane and never heard these words before, like, would you recommend someone just go on like a period app and like put in their last period, and then that will tell you the cycle, even so you would start to be aware of it?
Yes.
Okay.
We recommend everybody use an app. If you don't have a cycle, you can use the phases of the moon, which is cool. Sort of like the start of the full moon through the month. So just kind of paying attention to that. But it does bring you closer to your body. And I love that idea because it's just like empowering women to understand where they are and what their bodies are capable of.
And if somebody wants to, we'll link all of this in the show notes, but it sounds like if somebody wants to order online, order some Luna Seeds, they can absolutely do that, right?
Yes, please. It's lunaseeds.com, and we have options to either order the luteal or the follicular blend or both. It's called a Happy Hormones kit. We also, we ship them in glass jars, but then if you like them and want to subscribe, we'll send you paper bags. So we're very like environmentally friendly in that way. We're not going to just continue to send you glass jars for all that waste. And for listeners, we're also offering a discount of 10% on the Happy Hormones kit.
This is our first Are We Happy Yet discount code. We're officially part of the capitalistic podcast system. It's
We've done it.
We did it. And the code is going to be Happy 10.
Happy 10, and we'll link that.
Yeah.
Yes. But
Check
if
it
you
out.
live in Summit County, you can also get Luna Seeds at Red Buffalo Cafe or at the Minimal Impact Shop, where Grit offices are. That's my plug.
I love it. The holidays are coming up. Great gift. They are so tasty. I like highly recommend them. Very cool mission, very cool group of women running that whole thing. So Carly, you're a very well-rounded human being. You're just doing so many cool things. Thank you for this super interesting and thoughtful conversation. I really, really enjoyed it. If people want to work with you, want to learn more about you, where can they find you? How do they get in touch with you?
Yes, great question. It's been such a pleasure as well. I work at Grit Therapy under Jane. So, yes, please, if you'd like to contact me just to chat or connect and potentially work together, you can reach out to info@Grit Therapy or me directly, which is Carly at grittherapy.com. I'm trying to think of any other way to reach me. No, that's it. But things that I offer, obviously nature therapy. So if you want to like dig further into that, I am here for it.
And she's not just talking about like walk, like she'll ski with you.
Wow.
She'll trail run with you. Like,
oh my gosh,
she can do it all. So if you think that would be useful for you, Carly's your gal.
That's so
that
cool.
bilateral movement in nature, baby.
Right.
It's healing. And I offer EMDR, internal family systems, parts work. If you just want to do talk therapy, I'm here. So that would be the ways and the things that I can offer.
You're so cool, Carly.
Yeah, right?
You guys are so cool.
Awesome, Carly. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Carly.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You've been listening to Are We Happy Yet? A podcast brought to you by Green Roof Studios. This episode was produced, recorded, and edited by Jane Thatcher Hahn and Hannah Buzzo. All original music was written and recorded by the Jane Thatcher Band. For more information about the show, or to get in touch with us, please visit our website at www.arewehappyyetpodcast.com. Thanks for joining. See you next time.